Hello there, my name is Rosie Goldsmith and welcome to Rock Talks, our new conversation series featuring literary rock stars from both Romania and Britain. These conversations are part of our free 4-week literature festival, Romania Rocks, brought to you by the Romanian Cultural Institute in London and the European Literature Network, ELNet. The idea behind Rock Talks is to bring together some of Romania's greatest living writers with their equally brilliant British counterparts. Writers we think have something in common, even though they may never have met and come from completely different cultures. By the end of the Romania Rocks Festival on the 13th of November, we will have a wonderful series of films of all our events, readings and workshops, including a collection of 9 Rock Talks. You can watch all of them again on our YouTube channel, on the RCI and ELNet websites. Deborah Levy talking to Magda Carneci, David Mitchell to Andrei Codrescu, and Fiona Sampson to Anna Blandiana. They are remarkable and revealing interviews. Check out our festival programme for all the online event listings and of course the links to the events. Now each Rock Talk lasts 1 hour. All our festival events are free, as I've said, and they're all filmed by London Video Stories. And you can buy most of the books we're talking about from our dedicated independent booksellers, and they're all on our website as well. You can download a free copy of the first ever magazine of Romanian poetry and prose in English, the Romanian Riveter, featuring many of our Romanian Rock Talk writers, including Ioana Pârvulescu, who you are meeting tonight in conversation with her literary rock star partner, A.L. Kennedy. Welcome to both of you. And each time I've spent in the company of these two women, A.L. and Ioana, I feel better, and I'm sure you will too. I've met and interviewed them both off and on over about 5, 6, 7 years, but never together. And here they both are in my digital sitting room. So welcome to you. Essex, I think, Alison, and Bucharest, Ioana, and welcome to Wiltshire.
When we met the first time, I remember I presented myself on the scene, I believe, in Brussels as a human being, European and Romanian, in this order. It's still the same, nothing changed. That's good, that's trustful for me. As for these meetings, we can show to all of possibly our spectators that we have a room of our own, like in the essay of Virginia Woolf. So I have a room of my own. You are invited here, and please, let's do it.
Let's do it, absolutely. Well, look, the reason that I brought you two together specifically because you don't have to agree with each other. In fact, have a nice old argument if you want to. But you do have certain things in common, and I'm just curious to know whether you both feel that when you talk together now. But you both play around with genre and topics and history and ideas and timelines. You're both very funny and witty. Now, Ioana, I know how important humour is to you, and absolutely know how important it is to Alison. But and you both appeal to both literary and popular readership, and I think that's an incredible gift as well. And you're both, for me, as your readers, unafraid of addressing both sadness and joy in your writing together. And I'm going to call you intellectuals. I know it's not a very great thing to say in this country. People don't like intellectuals in our blighted Britain, but
thinking. Ooh,
yeah,
no.
oh, I know. Intellectuals, European, funny and wise women. That's you two. According to your own website and Wikipedia, you've published 10 novels and 7 story collections and 4 non-fiction works. And of course, there's all the stand-up comedy, there is the journalism, there are the radio plays, there are the adaptations, there's Doctor Who. You are so prolific, so wildly prolific that I don't have time to read everything you write. And I want to. I want to. Just slow down so I can keep up.
I am getting slower. I was meant to be finished the novel by this time, but I mean, I've written other stuff, but yeah, I haven't.
What have you been writing this? I mean, the short story collection was published earlier this year, so just after COVID had broken, really. What have you been writing since? Have you felt like writing fiction, or have you been writing?
I've written two long poems, one about losing Europe and one about the Black Lives Matter thing addressed to my fellow white people. So just crack a history book. Would be the potted version. Starting to write the libretto for an opera for the Munich Biennale, which was very nice and exciting and terrifying. And a short story that I wrote in a week by not sleeping for a week, which was
and the
odd.
reason you didn't sleep was?
There was a deadline. They sort of said, do you have a story? And when they always say when you've just had a book of short stories, like, do you have a story? And it's like, no, this is the one time in my life when I don't, because they're all in the bloody book.
Yeah.
But I said, well, if you don't mind me writing about now, because it's so intense, it's fine. I just don't sleep for a week, and I'll write you a 5,000 word short story, so which I did.
Wow, congratulations. And I mean, the fact that you do write about now and you're not frightened about writing about now, because there are writers who are putting it off or will never write about now. But you've confronted it head on.
Well, it's hard now because with a novel, I wanted it to be in the first 100 days of Boris, because that was a terrible, corrupt, ridiculous disaster.
That's the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, you are talking about.
I don't think you could describe him in those terms. It's like a carved vegetable inside the skin of an unhappy gibbon.
I can't possibly comment.
No, and I try not to. So it's the first 100 days of that, and then it's like, oh no, now there's an even more apocalyptic metaphorical shitstorm. Oh no, that's on fire and it's full of orphans. They're being eaten by dogs, and it's like, when can I stop? Because there will always be. But eventually, I got the point where, okay, a lot of it is retrospective, and I've been writing the retrospective bits. But the main storyline, I now know when the person who's writing the book starts writing the book. Found peak stupid British day, in as far as that isn't every day. Happy National Indoors Month, by the way.
Oh my goodness. Well, look, good luck with all that. And it sounds that there are lots of things going on in your head, and we're getting a few of them. It's like sort of watching some incredible. I can actually see your brain fizzing. It's wonderful. Maybe it's the Zoom connection. Has this particular time made you, inspired you to write anything about the pandemic, about how people are reacting, or even to fictionalize any of it?
I think writers need more time for these things. Writers like me, not every writer, I need more time. I have to think about it. Journalists, as you are, Rosie, they are very up to date. They write about the present. But I always wrote about the past in a way. But during the pandemic, I wrote something interesting, because it was this wall in my kitchen which needed to be painted. And it has some spots, and I could not call anyone to come to paint it. So I decided to write a diary on the wall, and it was actually it was a poetical diary. I noticed that poetry was very important to me, even if I'm more a novelist. I'm a novelist, not a poet. But these days, I remarked that poetry was very strong, and for me very comforting. So I wrote a diary with quotes from great poets, not from me. I don't know, maybe I should mention just Emily Dickinson, because it's something in English. I wrote in English, in German, and in Romanian, but most of them are in Romanian. But this Emily Dickinson quote is, an hour is a sea between a few and me, with them would harbor be. And it's about friends that are not here.
It's interesting that both of you have turned to poetry. And I've heard that actually from several other writers I've been interviewing the last few weeks and months as well. And short stories too. I think maybe it's something about the time, it's slightly edgy, restless time that, you know, we feel better able to not just read short stories, but in your case, write them, and poetry as well. Ioana, just so that you know, people can know a little bit more about what you write, I'll just give a quick whip round to tell people that you're a novelist, as you've been saying, a poet, an essayist, and you're also, and as several of your students have been saying, you are a wonderful teacher. You are a professor of modern Romanian literature at Bucharest University. Several of your students have been watching these talks, so very, very highly respected. And you've edited, like Alison, you've edited anthologies and literary journal. You've curated a series of books at the famous Humanitas Publishing House. And we hope they'll one day publish something from Alison as well, because there's nothing yet in Romanian, is there? We haven't got anything in Romanian. Very sad. And well, here you are. Ioana is a translator from French and German, but I'm sure could translate from English into Romanian as well. Not only Kundera and Asterix, but Rilke and Saint-Exupéry. So, and I know how much you love.
That must be so hard.
I know.
Oh, it's so there, and you have to be perfect all the time. Oh.
Well, that's what she does. Pretty amazing, and has written several books of historical non-fiction. As you say, you love history. I know, and love certain periods of history, and 4 novels which have been bestsellers in Romania. Life Begins on Friday, which is published also in English, translated by Alistair Ian Blythe. Istros books. The Future Begins on Monday. The Innocents, which is in the process of being translated, we hope, and The Prophecy, which is your latest novel, and we have a piece, as you know, in the Riveter magazine as well, but it's being translated and hopefully published next year. Is that right, Ioana?
Let's hope, if we have some fees for the translation.
Yes, that's always the thing, yeah.
Now, there are certain topics that I really want to make sure we cover in this time together. Now, Ioana, you were born in Brasov. Alison, as you know, was born in Dundee. And I know that Scotland is incredibly important to you, Alison, and Brasov and Bucharest, your cities are really important to you. Cities are major parts of your writing, I think, of your novels. They're like characters almost. Ioana, tell us about your background, where you come from, and how you got to this wonderful stage.
So you're right. I'm from Brasov. That was very important for me. This city is inside me, even if I am in Bucharest, and I go very often to Brasov. But more than the city, it's a wonderful city, actually. A beautiful city, surrounded by mountains, something really special. I invite everyone to come. But maybe more than my city, I was shaped by my house. And I wrote a novel, The Innocents, about my house. I have it here.
Oh, lovely.
It's about my house in Brasov. For me, a house is not made with walls and bricks and roofs and everything, doors, I don't know. A house is made of feelings, of words, of fears, of everyone who lived in that house. My ancestors lived there from many generations, and so I feel for my house. I have feelings for my house. I was very glad to read in your book, Alison, goodbye house, hello house, night house. When during the pandemic, I couldn't go to Brasov, so even for the Easter, I was in this kind of Easter with my family on the internet. And after 4 months or so, I went to Brasov finally, and I saw my house. And I must say, I had this strong feeling. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to keep her in my arms. So really, for me, the house is maybe my background, is the place where I learned to be myself.
Sure.
Alison, can I ask you then the same question? Because do you feel the same way about Dundee or even Glasgow, where you spent, you know?
Glasgow, yes. I mean, Dundee was a place people left. It's very post-industrial, harsh, bad weather. I mean, now it's slightly different, but it's still very divided. If you're poor in Dundee, you know, you just will die young and you will have a not good life. Actually, this house has a personality. This house, it's very annoyed if I go away for a long time. So it's very happy now.
And this is Essex. So
yeah.
You've been basically in well, lockdown, but at home in Essex during this period.
Yeah, I had to go to London, which is interesting, but you don't want to live there. Because I was in Glasgow for 30 years and I love it. It's very European, very friendly, very crazy, very funny. Everyone is funny and nuts. It's a little bit Italian, it's a little bit like Milan, it's Irish, you know, it's this lovely mix. It's a little bit Jewish, it's a little bit Polish. It's all the craziness. But yeah, so I moved here, which oddly, a lot of people from Scotland end up here. And it's like the landscape that I grew up with. And, you know, these things, now I can hear curlews and look at salt marshes, which is what I did when I was 5, which we understand. And, you know, from looking at the Ioana's book that I got, you know, I mean, historical writers, there are historical writers who just show you that they've learnt stuff. And there are historical writers like Ioana who realize that layering and the echoing. And you never write about the past. You always write about the present. And you always write about the past. And none of that matters. It's, you know, this more interesting layer.
So Ioana, when did you start your interest in writing? I mean, when did you start to write, and when do you feel you became a writer?
At a very young age. My grandma one morning said to me, now Ioana, you have to write a poem about the sun. I remember exactly, it was about the sun. Can you do that? She asked me. I said, yes, of course. Very simple. And I began and I wrote a poem about the sun with rhyme, of course. I have it.
Can you remember it?
No, but I kept it in a notebook. And so began my never-ended story with poetry. But then it was something more important than that. My father gave me a notebook, and he put in on the notebook dedication. And this dedication was something like to Ioana, to write down her feelings and her thoughts. And if I was 10 then, and if they are, I don't know, gifted with grace, something like that, then she should publish them.
That's perfect.
2 years after that, my father died, and I fulfilled his
wish,
prediction.
His prophecy, I suppose.
Yes.
Well,
and I have this notebook, and everything that I wrote there is bad, and it's not.
But you were a writer. You can see, if you're a 10-year-old person, you can see they're a writer.
So, as you say, at that age, you're always writing things that rhyme. They have to rhyme. I remember my first poem, which I won in something like Guy Fawkes' Night gives you a terrible fright. I mean, it's like
yes.
I think I won something, in a magazine, like June and School Friend or something. But Alison, when did you start to write? When did you think, I like this?
Again, it's a parental thing. I mean, my mother was a primary school teacher. She taught me to read before I went to school. So by the time I was 4, I could read everything. And I was worried I'd run out of books. So writing really was a way of intensifying the experience of reading and adding to the amount of reading it was possible for me to do. Because you experience the story in a way that no one else does when you make it happen. Obviously, then you can't read it, because why would you? And you can't read it in the way that somebody else would read it, because it won't be a surprise. But yeah, it was an extension of that. So I always wrote. It's like when you go.
Did you write diaries? Did either of you write journals? You did.
A bit, but not to write. I would mercifully brief period of wearing black and sitting in cafes and making notes, which are going to be crap because there's no character in it and no plot. So it's just writing. It's the easiest bit of writing. It's just I will describe something, but if it has nothing modifying it, it's crap. You'll never be able to use it. But you're getting there. But most of the time, first 10 years when I was learning to write, I wasn't working with people who wanted to write or doing workshops, or I was working with mentally handicapped people, physically handicapped people in prison, people who did not want to be writers, but who were transformed and lit by the thing that happens when you write. So I couldn't run away in I must suffer, because these people are really suffering, and the solution to that is writing. And I kept having to come home and think, this is grisly having to do this writing. It's really hard and it's really horrible what I'm producing. I have to have joy somehow. And you're always aiming for because you're your first reader. And I love reading. The thing I loved before, Alistair Gray, who's not with us now, he always put goodbye at the end of his books, because that's the feeling when it's like, oh no, that's the last sentence. I can't read that for the first time again. It's that world has gone. Those people have gone.
So I'm just having interviewed you both before, I really get a strong feeling that you both feel when you're actually in the process of writing that you are discovering something about yourself. I mean, it is transformative in that regard as well, and that you love it. You actually like that feeling of writing and self-discovery. Would that be fair enough, Alison?
I don't think I'm discovering anything about me, because I'm being other people. That's the blissful thing, is I'm not worrying, and I'm not obsessing, and I'm not moaning, and I'm not whining, and I'm not telling myself the negative narrative, because there's no room. It's like meditating all day because you're being fed, and it's really hard work because you're not. So you have to keep making everything work, and his psychology and his movements and what he's wearing and what he's looking at, how he's feeling, and keeping going with how he's feeling, but so you can intuit it without me yelling it. And it's, So when you finish, there's just that, oh God, I've spent 8 hours not being me. And I've discovered that it is loathsome. That's all I've ever discovered, is it's quite loathsome to continually be me. And occasionally you look at the characters and you think, well, what am I learning about people? What am I saying about people? But it's not that I'm spending a lot of time with me.
Mm. How do you see that, Ioana, the actual process of writing? Because you've described previously this, in some ways, enjoying isolation, enjoying being by yourself and escaping into writing.
Yes, and for me, writing is living other lives, because one life is not enough. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes it's enough to have one life, but you want to try, like you try other clothes, for example, to try other lives. And by writing, you may try very deep these lives. People forget that literature has to do something with joy. It's not something torture. It must not be a torture. We have this torture in our lives, outside, inside, everyone. As you said, Alison, it's enough to be human being, and you have all.
You know, that is so amazing about both of you. And I'm just going to, I've got a pile of books here on my desk. I'm just going to bring this one here because Alison may remember she wrote this one. She wrote so much. I don't know how you remember everything you've written. This is a big one. And actually, something you wrote, I love. I only ever ask writers to sign my book if I've interviewed them. And you wrote it here, to Rosie, all good things in all languages. Now, that was just after this, came out. It was obviously in some European context again where we met. But there is such, I'm not going to give away the ending, but this idea of joy. And neither of you is afraid of writing about joy. And it's incredibly difficult to do. To have positive, optimistic people in novels, in short stories, but you both do. Now, Alison, how do you do it? And why do you do it?
It's funny because optimism has come to mean ridiculously unfeeling fascists. They always say, I'm an optimist, so I'm not going to provide for anybody in trouble. I'm just going to be optimistic about them surviving, them having their head cut off. It's joy. It's not even optimism, because you can have joy and be realistic. Or it's this thing out with being.
It's love as well. I mean, here the final words. Do you remember the final words in your own novel?
I remember being up very late trying to go through how the hell do I get both of them to actually relax and be together.
This is Meg and John, of course, the couple in this 24-hour novel. 24 hours is a long time, as you can see from all these pages. It is, here it is, love, here it is.
Yeah.
Now you both write about love and, joy. And I love that fact. It's not Hollywood, is it? It's not the Hollywood happy ending. That's not what you're talking about.
That's not joy, that's happy. And happy's no use. I mean, if you want to go for something, go for contentment, because happy's, it's just like a plastic cup instead of Sevres porcelain or something. I mean, I remember I love magicians.
Mm-hmm. I like to.
Because it's kind of this, you kind of sniff, oh, that's the same thing. And he was doing this, in a restaurant, little magic tricks for people having dinner, very low grade experience. But he did this trick with this woman, and she'd just forgotten where she put her ring, I think it was. And he told her, oh, you probably, and he'd seen it, he'd noticed, said, oh, you probably left it upstairs. And of course she went, oh yes, I'm bound to have. And then he made it appear, purely because he'd picked it up and she hadn't noticed where. But it was her dead mother's ring. And he'd made something happen that was so huge. And he saw her face. And because, again, the smart guy went, I don't want to do magic. I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make wonder happen.
Mm.
And magicians, they've stolen, you know, thaumaturge, worker of wonders, which should be all artists, but because they're magicians, they've stolen it. But that idea of what am I here for? To give you wonder, so when your cat catches fire, there's a bit of you left afterwards.
So the fact that you so often write really you know, about grief, about loss, about difficult relationships, that nevertheless come out not always with a happy ending, but with some feeling. As I say, I always feel better after I've read your books, and same with Ioana. I always feel better, and I sort of try to think, why is it? Because you do make me feel more positive about life. I think, you know, and I just wonder whether that's always your ambition at the end of a story or a novel, to make us feel that.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, well, I would hope. I mean, I've never, I think we both like people.
Yes,
I
exactly.
think we acknowledge that they do horrific things, but I think we both think they're a good idea. So if you're a person who's reading, we're not making you feel bad that way, I think.
Ioana, tell us about your novels and your love of history. I mean, this particular period, the 19th century, this amazing period in Romanian history before the 50 years or so of communism, the time that you grew up, of course, that awful time that you grew up, and don't write about, but you went back in time and wrote about this glorious time in the 19th century. Was that a very deliberate act to just put
I believe
communism behind you?
I believe it was an instinctive act. A refugee in this period of time. I escaped in this time. I read a lot of documentary things about this time, a lot of letters. I think 1,000 letters, journals, diaries also, a lot of things. So I I had the feeling I was there in this time. I was there. I lived there, and I liked not everything, because of course there were bad things, pandemic things, but we lived them also. And a lot of bad things, but I loved the thoughts, the souls also of these people, their capacity to be empathic with, to understand each other, and to think with more trust about the future. They had trust in the future. We deceived them, actually.
Yeah.
We deceived them, but they had trust in us. They believed we will be somebody. We are not, unfortunately. So I liked very much this period of time, but I have to say that 5 years ago, I decided that we have to write a testimony also about the communism period of time. So I invited about 100 persons from different backgrounds, doctors, workers, teachers, different kind of people, to remember, to write very short stories, not stories, reality things. Not literature, but real facts.
Witness accounts, almost.
Yeah,
Witness
exactly, exactly. And it was this book, I have it here. It's Me too. I lived. Me too. I lived during the communist period of time. So it's a testimony with stories that are from very funny. You have to laugh when absurd, like in Eugene Ionesco's theater, and tragic, of course. So you have all the kind of stories. They are in different parts. For example,
that's the kind of thing that we should have in English, I think, to have that translated.
It would be
amazing.
It's the day-to-day life, eating, medical problems, education, leisure, love. It's something awful about abortion. A very short story, but it's better than all fiction I read about that. To stand in queue, and the transport. And I want to show you a photo, if I find it, I hope, because I lived this kind of. You see, bus. It's a bus, and people are. It's during the winter. And I traveled like that in Budapest when I was a student.
Ioana, you were in 1990. You were, just a little bit older than that, I think, and you were coming out of communism. You had lived you and your family, generations of your family, had lived for nearly 50 years under communism. And I wonder what that does to you as a person and as a writer as well.
Well, it was an experience, of course. For me, it was also good that after that, I could enjoy every single little thing of my life. But the new generation, unfortunately, cannot, because they lived in a free world. So they don't know that it's wonderful to drink a coffee, for example, good coffee every morning. I enjoy every morning my coffee, I have to say, because I had no coffee before. I enjoy a warm place to live in. You always have two parts of a thing, but of course, I always said, if the communism would be longer for me, I probably couldn't survive. I couldn't survive because it was too hard for me. It was very, very difficult. And it was worse and worse in the 80s.
In the end, it was,
So in 1990, when this so-called revolution was, it was really the happiest day of my social life, 21 of December, because I was suddenly free. I could say what I wanted. I could write what I wanted. I had no fear anymore, fears, and so on. It was really something. I remember very, very well this day. And I'm happy that I lived this day during my lifetime.
So at the same time, Alison, when you published your first book of short stories, what was happening in your life? And was that a good time in your life?
No, I mean, it was kind of a different discomfort. No, I didn't have any money. I was very cold because I couldn't put the heating on. My grandmother would send me cheese and my mother would send me potatoes. So I was living on cheese and potatoes. So I probably was going to get scurvy. Yeah, it was just very difficult. And, Margaret Thatcher was beginning to disassemble all of the things that might sort of keep you safe if things kept going wrong. So no, it wasn't particularly nice.
You wrote so much that as you started to write more and you were published more, and you were everything you wrote was praised, and some, of course, everybody has their critics, but you've been consistently brilliant in my eyes.
Yeah, that's very unpleasant.
But has that been something you've have you enjoyed being praised? And
no, I avoid it like the plague.
Seriously?
I worked out with the first book. It's very nice if you win things, because if you win things and you're a writer, they give you money. They don't give you a statuette or a silly thing. They give you money because they know you don't have any. So that's nice. But no, I read the reviews for the first book of short stories, and they were so viscerally disturbing that I never did it again.
You never read your reviews?
No, and also you realised how pointless it was, because what can you do? You did it a year ago.
Well, I could read you reams of reviews of you. I mean, I've got so many times.
No.
And I highlight them, little yellow highlighters.
Oh God, no.
Wonderful.
But if you talk to actors, they'll go, oh God, no, of course you don't read the reviews. We seem to have this strange kind of branch of the arts where you because so few. I mean, I remember one that I did read. In fact, I think it was that book. It was Crichton Smith, who was a lovely man and a beautiful poet and a humorist and just a great Scottish writer. And I was a baby Scottish writer. And he wrote the kind of review that Raymond Carver used to write, which was, I kind of know how to do this, and these are the things you're good at, and that was a mistake. And you're not very good at that, but I think you could be if you thought about it like this. And it was like kind of just sitting and having tea with him. And that was lovely. And all of the rest of it was just crazy. And then, London and literary London is so bizarre and has nothing to do with writing. And is very English. It's not, big hats and bow ties and smoking a pipe and drinking absinthe. There's none of the sort of capital R romantic thing. It's just people taking cocaine and wearing black and talking oddly late at night. And it's just not to do with writing. I mean, talking to other writers is great, but you generally wouldn't do that. You'd talk to all of the other people who wouldn't know how you did what you did. And if you went too far, you'd think, well, am I doing it wrong? Because I don't seem to identify any of what you were telling me. Because it's that literary analysis, that Oxford, this is what a short story is. And, I'm sitting now, I'll sit there and go, no, it's not. I've never needed to know any of that. I don't think many writers ever have. None of this existed until after World War I. You're not necessary. And if you become a parasitic form, you destroy literature, you make it about money and gossip. And then I get angry. Because this is the beautiful thing I want everyone to have, so that they find the thing that keeps them alive. That's not about money and gossip.
Ioana, what does it mean to you to have the praise and the prizes and the money and hopefully lots of money?
Hopefully.
But what?
I like money. I will never say, oh, I prefer to be poor and but I wanted to tell to Alison that I did not write a review about her book, but I wrote 2 or 3 lines. So I want to read these lines about her.
But this is different. But yeah.
Our current worries, anxieties, and fears are there, but she shows them so naturally in a genuine manner without emphasizing that we realize only afterwards that these stories are about ourselves. Her writing is not expressionist, but rather impressionist, made of nuance, of very fine psychological touches, lights and a lot of shadows, and a very good sense of humor. So that was my impressions as a reader.
Ioana, you're very generous towards Alison, and I think that's really wonderful. You're a very generous person. You both are to other writers as well. And thinking about your writing and where you come from Brasov, which is a very multicultural, multilingual place, city, and you speak several languages, you translate from several languages. I wonder how all that sort of feeds into your writing as well. I mean, if we just take Life Begins on Friday,
which is beautiful.
It's a beautiful, beautiful, your 19th century novel, the one that we have in English too, which is great. It's such a European novel.
I'm grateful to Susan Curtis. She published this novel. I have to say that we are friends now.
Yes.
So
this is your publisher, Istros Books.
Yes,
it was translated by Alistair Ian Blythe too.
Exactly. Yes, as I always repeat this joke that I heard from my grandparents in Brasov, even dogs bark in 3 languages. It was German, Hungarian, and Romanian, of course. And for this novel, Life Begins on Friday, it's true that in that time, Bucharest was very cosmopolitan. There were many people from different countries, and it was more and more civilized city, and a very interesting city where you could hear many languages, and you never get bored. Not during the day and not during the night. It was a city that lived 24 hours a day. So, so I believe everything that one lives during his life is important and everything he reads also. I like reading. As Alison said, I like reading. I like books. I really, I would live in a book, but not as a bookworm. So I think, yes, everything that I lived during my childhood began, it was an adventurous childhood. We did a lot of silly things. And my books have also something adventurous in this. Yes.
Well, I mean, you also have this wonderful, I mean, there's a bit of a crime novel in there, Life Begins on Friday. There's a bit of time travel. There's a bit of a almost fairy tale like quality, which again is something I sort of occasionally pick up on with Alison's writing as well too. You're trying out different things all the time. We've talked in this event about trying on different clothes, and in your latest novel, Ioana, which is coming out soon, hopefully in English, The Prophecy, again it's completely different. You are Jonah. You're writing about Jonah and the whale.
Yeah, because here it's an interesting story. My name is Ioana, and during the last 20 years or more, I received letters with "Dear Iona." So not Ioana, but Iona.
Jonah.
And Jonah is in Romanian.
Jonah, yeah.
Jonah. So I was very angry at the beginning. I'm not Jonah, I'm a woman, I'm Ioana. But after that, that was repeated. It was very often, it happens often. So I decided to read about Jonah, and I discovered that this Jonah is actually like our poets. He was a kind of poet from his time, and a very interesting guy. I read also an essay from Julian Barnes that I like very much, and other things, many things about Jonah. I discovered it's a great character, and his story for a novelist has everything you need, from fantastic things until, let's say, 1001 Nights. This Nineveh thing is like in 1001 Nights. So in my story also, the story is told by many feminine voices. First of all, the daughter of Jonah, and then her and it begins at that time and it ends in our time, and exactly today. So
I'm really looking forward to the full novel. I mean, we've got an extract in our magazine, in the Romanian Riveter, which is wonderful. No, I mean, it's very exciting to think about what the whole novel. Before we're coming to the end, but I just wanted to ask you about translation, both of you about translation. We were mentioning that Alistair Ian Blythe is your English translator currently, Ioana, but you yourself are a translator, and you translate from French and German primarily. A lot is translated into Romanian by comparison with very little being translated into English. And Alison and I have talked about this on several occasions. We're going to get very upset now, but you know, I'm going to bring up the magic figure. We think about 4.5%
from any language.
Literary fiction is translated from other countries.
Miracle that one of this percent is that I'm included in this.
Yeah, you're a unicorn.
That's right. But what does translation mean to both of you? To Ioana, what actually being a translator and being translated, what does it mean to you?
I'm just occasionally a translator. I do that with much pleasure. I like translating. It's something that is very beautiful, and I think you need a little bit sense of sacrifice if you translate, because you are just you do bridges. For me, translation is constructing bridges between people, between cultures, between countries, and I hate borders. So bridges is in a kind of the contrary of the border. And
is it true that about 50 to 60% of what you read in Romania is translated?
It could be. I'm not so good in this statistic.
It's a pretty high figure. It's a high figure.
Could be. Anyway, from the beginning, in Romania, there were many translations. And people are very interested in translation, also in Romanian literature, I have to say. Both of these parts. And we talk about communism. During this time, people tried very hard to be up to date with translation, with everything that was written in the Western countries. And they brought some books, sometimes books that were not permitted, not allowed to be read in Romania. For example, Milan Kundera, that I translated now.
You translated Milan Kundera?
I translated Kundera, yes. La fête de l'insignifiance. We try to read everything, and that, in my opinion, even if the statistics say that there is not so much interest for reading nowadays in Romania, my impression, my empirical impression is that people are very interested in books and read pretty much.
You have you have so many amazing writers, and as professor of modern literature, I think you are in a good position to know that there's good writing in Romania. Alison, you're translated into many languages, but do you read widely in other languages? What does translated literature mean to you? Does it scare you in any way?
Yeah, it's what I sort of grew up reading. If I think of what I was reading when I was a student, all of it was translated. All of it was certainly good books to read. I was reading Milan Kundera, I was reading Laszlo Krasznahorka, I was reading Bohumil Hrabal, I was reading Mario Vargas Llosa. I wasn't really reading anybody. The nearest I got to Britain was probably France, and I was painstakingly learning French by reading Boris Vian, which is great fun, but it doesn't allow you to learn French. A lot of your vocabulary doesn't exist in the real world.
What does it mean, though, to you to be translated into other languages?
It's an honor.
Mm-hmm.
It's an absolute honor. It's one of the most beautiful things you could be given, because that initial miracle of being able to read. I suddenly, I went to Paris when I was 4 with my parents, and suddenly there's all this. There's all these other things. I don't know anything about these. I can't read any of these signs. Oh my goodness, the world is full of all these things. So there's even more for me to want.
To conclude, I just want you both to comment on something which I think is really fascinating. Ioana, right at the beginning, before we even started recording, you said you were nervous about appearing on a screen like this, an interview like this, and then also because Alison is a well-known performer, broadcaster. And I mean, it's amazing how often you do that, and you do it so well. And of course, the one thing that people pick up on Alison's CV, regardless of all the novels, regardless of all the short story collections, is that you are a stand-up comedian.
Yep, everything else disappears. When I won the Whitbread Prize, the Whitbread Prize, it turned into the Costa Prize. Stand-up comedian wins novel. Yeah,
I was a little bit scared about that.
But now you've met her, Ioana, and you know that she's a wonderful person and a stand-up comedian. Has the experience been okay? Not too scary?
Wonderful. Not okay, wonderful. But I felt that from the beginning, also with you, Rosie, and with Alison.
Yeah.
I think we are the same kind of women. I believe you can see when people understand each other's or not. So it was great, really.
I'm going to, on those very warm words, I'm going to actually say thank you to both of you, to Ioana Pârvulescu and to A.L. Kennedy, so much. And there are certain words that are used about your writing, both of you: your kindness, your humanity, your bravery, and this amazing combination of joy and sorrow that you managed to get into your writing. Thank you both so much for your writing, but also for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.